if you're trying to sell a house and you've got just random Joe Blow coming in making an offer, and you've got a buyer's agent who you know is going to be, has a committed client, you're going to want to deal with a buyer's agent because they're not going to stuff you around. They're going to go ahead. You've already got those relationships with the agents that sort of gives you that little extra edge, I think. And like most people aren't confident in negotiating. Like, you buy a house maybe once, twice in your life.
It's a scary thing to do.
It's scary. I remember when we tried to buy a Kinkamer house, and I think we made like 2 or 3 offers, and they just kept saying no. And we didn't know how to deal with that. So we just were going, we'll give you more. Whereas I suppose a buyer's agent probably could have been like, well, we're just going to hold off. We'll make them sweat a bit. Or you would have had that strategy.
And when we bought that house, I think we paid about $40,000 more than we should have, just because I freaked out.
He freaked out. He's like, what do you want? Just tell us what you want.
We in fairness to me,
I was pregnant.
She was very, very, very pregnant. And we just
very pregnant.
I just need the security.
Well, this episode, we welcome some lovely clients, Will and Jill, to the show. Thank you so much for your time and for coming on today to talk a little bit about your experience living on the Central Coast, raising your family here, and your experience and your journey on purchasing property here, and I guess how we met and using our services.
Yep.
So welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. People love hearing stories, I guess, of how the journey unfolds, and yours was an interesting one, like they all are. Everyone has their own individual story, but I guess it was a journey of discovery somewhat for you guys.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about why you love the coast, and why you ended up working with us and ultimately found your dream home.
Cool. Do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
Yeah, so we actually moved up the coast before it was cool. We've been here for about 10 years, and we wanted to get out of Sydney. We felt like we just weren't enjoying the lifestyle there. So we moved up for a 6-month trial, and we just rented, and we kind of bounced around renting for a while. And then Will got a job locally, and we found out we were having our second child. So we decided to purchase a place in Kincumber, and we managed to outgrow that eventually. And so then we decided we wanted to kind of upgrade. That's where we ended up getting you guys. But I guess the reason we love the coast for us is it's definitely the lifestyle. Like, as a mum who had young children at the time, there's playgrounds, there's parks, there's beaches, there's just so many young families moving up, and it's just got that really relaxed, safe sort of holiday type feel. But at the same time, you're so close to Sydney. You jump on the freeway and you're in Wollongong in like 30 minutes.
Yeah, it was always interesting when because I was working in Sydney originally. And we always sort of say it's when you first move up, you're kind of in this situation where you sleep on the Central Coast, but your life is still there.
Yeah, true.
So it was awkward for a while, but I always remember like on the train on the way home, you get to Hornsby, and the whole vibe of everybody would just like.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
It's why people are. It's a typical story. It's why people are moving up here. You can get more for your money.
Yeah, well, that was.
But just with young kids, it's such a nice lifestyle. Didn't you take up surfing?
Yes. So I do surfing. I love how, even these days I can pick the kids up from school and be like, hey, let's go to the beach. And we just jump in the car. 5 minutes later, we're at the beach. We're having a swim.
Yeah.
I like that really relaxed sort of lifestyle. But at the same time, we've got big shopping centers. Like, we've got Erin Fair, we've got cinemas, we've got ice skating rink. It's not like, we're in the middle of a country town and there's nothing much to do. There's still that social scene around. So I think that's kind of what really drew us up here, and what kept us up here as well is once we sort of found our groove and found our people and started making friends, this really helped us to settle in.
Yeah, you raised an interesting point, Will, before. A lot of people find they're in that transition. I did it myself, even though I grew up here. I moved away for a time and came back. You have one toe here and one toe there until you let go. And you're right. I used to get to the top of Carryong Hill when I was driving, and I'd look at the Brisbane water, and instantly it was just, I'm home. Yeah. It's like, So it's so very true.
And plus, it's much more, at least it was a lot more affordable up here at the time that we moved up. Because we owned a townhouse down in Sydney, and, we knew that we were going to be having kids relatively soon and everything. We're just like, well, we don't really want to raise kids in a townhouse because we're pretty loud.
That's another big part of why people move. Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, we were able to go from, a 2-bedroom townhouse to a 4-bedroom house with a double garage and a swimming pool for, I think we paid $100,000 less for that than what we sold the townhouse for. So it just kind of made sense.
So you obviously bought your property in Kincumber and you were there for a little while. And as life does, you grow, your family grows, your business grows.
Yep.
What then made you reach out to a buyer's agent for your next purchase?
So Michelle and I actually used to work together a long time ago. And I already knew that she was an absolute champion. So she was a bit of a hero of mine. So I heard about your business and I hadn't really even considered a buyer's agent as something that I would potentially need. But, I'd seen some of the content that you guys were putting out and I knew that we were doing and I wanted to help support you as well. So I thought, hey, this actually sounds kind of cool. And then I think we ran into you at the Avoca market and we had a little chat.
So did you not know much about, that led you down the path of, hey, what is a buyer's agent?
About a buyer's agent was what you'd explained in your Facebook content and stuff. Like I didn't even know that buyer's agents existed.
There you go. This was, to put context, how many, 2 years ago? 3?
More than that.
More,
now,
3 or 4.
It would have been more than that.
21, maybe?
21, okay.
Whereas the flip side is for my family, obviously I have an accent, so I've grown up overseas. And every time we've moved, my parents have always used a buyer's agent because mum would be told, okay, so in 2 weeks you're moving from England to Australia. So she'd get sent over and they'd pair up with a buyer's agent who'd take her around her, show her schools, show us areas, say, these are the houses that you have the choice of, which one do you want? So I was a little bit more familiar with a buyer's agent, but more in the context of when you're moving to an area you don't know anything about. And then they're your lifeline because, you just have to trust them 100% that they're not going to send you some dodgy area. So again, it was a slightly different experience of a buyer's agent. We'd reached the point where Will's business was sort of outgrowing our house and we'd planned on the Kincumber house being our forever home, but we'd realized that wasn't going to be the case anymore. And at the same time, we kind of knew what we kind of wanted, but we weren't so clear on it. So for us, it was a large part of it was sort of about figuring out what can we afford, what do we want, where do we want to buy, what are we looking for, and sort of getting that clarity with you guys. That was a massive help for us as well.
Yeah, I think there were probably what we didn't realize at the start as well is that we both thought that we wanted the same thing, but there were actually some pretty key differences. So that's probably a pretty common thing. There's probably people listening to this going, that sounds like me.
You think.
I was like, we're going to get this kind of a house and this kind of a pool and this kind of, and he's like.
Well, for me, it was quite different because I grew up in forever home and then my parents separated when I was 12 and we lost that. And so for me, a big part of it was wanting to sort of reclaim what I lost as a kid. Yeah. So I wanted to be able to have those, I wanted to be able to provide my kids the same experiences that I had. So, being able to ride dirt bikes around and, that kind of lifestyle. So that was I had a very clear idea in my head of the lifestyle that I wanted, but not really a clear picture of, what was actually going to be practical within that.
Where to find it, how much it was going to cost. Yeah. Did you find that understanding values was really hard? Particularly when you're looking at acreages?
It had changed so much for us. We kind of got a bit stuffed over because we'd originally wanted to move the year prior and then we couldn't get approved for a mortgage because our mortgage broker was like, you've gone to a big single business, you have to wait another year. And in that year, the prices jumped so much that we kind of gone, oh, maybe we're not going to we missed the boat, we're out of luck. So that was kind of a big thing for us, was sort of adjusting our expectations and managing our expectations of what we could get and what we could be comfortable with, knowing that we're not the kind of people who want to stretch ourselves, particularly financially. Like, we would rather be safe and secure and not have that pressure. But at the same time, we also want to have a gorgeous house and lots of land. And so sort of managing the expectations and also managing the area we were in, because as you know, my parents
Schools as well.
Our kids were super settled. And my parents had actually just moved from Sydney up to the Central Coast and they were living about 8 minutes away from us. I didn't want to be like, thanks for moving up here, we're now going to move 45 minutes away. So, that kind of quite restricted our area selection choices.
Yeah, acreage is funny too because you don't have the same abundance of choice that you have with residential. So residential, particularly in this area, like a lot of the houses were built sort of, 80s to mid 90s.
Yep.
So they're very cookie cutter. They're all the same. And so you can basically go, yeah, I want that house, but I don't particularly like that block of land. So you just wait for that house to come up in the right location, right? Acreage is funny because not only do you not have the abundance of choice, but also, the houses tend to be a little bit more bespoke as well. So you're buying somebody else's dream rather than just like, the cookie cutter house. So it's much, and this is what I sort of didn't realize, I guess, was it's much harder to find exactly what you want, because, you might be paying, a basic house on that land might be worth, say, like 1.5, but you never actually find that. You find the house that's all done up and it's got flashy gardens, which isn't what we wanted. We didn't want a show house. We wanted a home, so to find exactly what you want, but then, you're paying for somebody else's dream, and then you don't have any money left over to create what you wanted to create. And so that adds a lot of complexity as well.
It's such good conversation because this is very typical of people's journey. They're also individual.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of thing that we unpack as we go along. Like we'll, as you know, we do a thorough brief before we start, but that's a starting point, and then the journey begins. And then we go through, and it's sometimes not until, some of our clients have looked at numerous properties that they start to understand what they actually do want. Like you said, you get on the same page and you start to go, well, this is kind of more what I want. So that's what we help with.
Where we were like, okay, well, maybe we look at just a house on residential. We looked at that one in Kincumber that had like a granny flat.
That's
like,
right.
Okay, maybe
we did.
Maybe we go for a house in a granny flat type option. And we looked around, we're like, yeah, no, we don't like this. Like we knew pretty quickly that no, we wanted more space for the kids.
Yeah, well, there was you kind of touched on it before as well, talking about how the market changed during the time as well. And like, so, I think when, at least for me, when we started the journey, I kind of had this idea that, we were going to be able to afford pretty much the dream. And then halfway through it kind of started to go, oh, this isn't going to happen anymore. Because like we literally saw, like I remember in the very early stages, we looked at places that then resold again towards the end of the journey for like over $1 million more than we looked at them at the start. So that's, that's a lot of money.
And the market's always changing, isn't it? So there are dynamics that COVID was, quite a dynamic, but nevertheless, we're still dealing with market dynamics all the time.
Yeah.
It's a shifting landscape.
I think it's really important. A lot of, I guess, other people they think a buyer's agent purely searches for property, but we've all just discussed that it starts with the vision. It starts with, I guess, your overall plan, and it may or may not be the same. And so in the beginning stages, a lot of how we support and help our clients is through understanding what is really important, what you're willing to compromise, what you're not, trying to sort through the thought processes and the options that, because so many clients come to us initially and they've got, well, we could do this option or we could do this option, or, we've got 3 or 4 options that would equally be suitable, but they're actually not, in fact. But it takes the journey and exploring those options to really narrow it down and go, right, now we're set. Now we know exactly what we're looking for, and then we go down that.
I think you guys did one of the things that I really appreciated was that you did a really good job of, understanding, like, and being able to cut through our BS, so you could see where we were going, but you were able to sort of guide in a nurturing kind of way without, because like a lot of times when, like, if you come in as a professional and somebody's telling you what they want and you're like, well, I know better than that. I know what they're really trying to say. But if you don't present that in the right way,
True.
You get pushed back.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
But we always felt like you guys kind of knew better than us. So we were happy to sort of take a step back and be like, no, they understand. They'll,
It's like Will kind of wanted to have like 100 acres so he could ride dirt bikes all over. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to mow that. I don't want to care for that. I want a property where I can stand on the house and see the whole property so I don't have a kid go missing. And I think sort of finding those compromises.
The practicalities of it.
Yeah, a lot of practicalities. Yeah. And also we really did have quite a niche. What we were looking for is quite niche because we needed that workspace will and that. It wasn't just like we want a house on a property. It was we need a house that has a space available.
Yeah, had to be multi-purpose.
Yeah. And if there wasn't one existing, then we had to have enough in the budget to then build something.
Well, that was where it got really complicated,
So we eventually found the property.
Yeah.
So let's go through. So auction, that was an interesting one. Let's talk about auctions, because auction is a very scary word for most people.
Yep.
Yeah.
When a property's going to auction, it's like, oh my gosh, how do I navigate
Particularly on the
this?
coast, because on the Central Coast there aren't a lot of auctions, not compared to Sydney and other areas. So this was sort of, and I guess during that period there were probably more auctions than ever before.
That was the
On the coast.
first experience.
Yeah.
So tell us your experience with auction. I know you were very nervous, but yeah, how did we sort of help support you through that process, I guess, and what was your experience?
Yeah, with the auction pro, like it was particularly complicated because we weren't able to use bridging finance because auction, you can't use bridging finance. But we also, so the total budget that we had was actually a lot higher in the end than what we could afford to go to auction with because of the limitations with the bridging
You were
finance.
still selling yours.
Exactly, yeah. So like if we'd already
And
sold
that's
the
an
other
interesting
house-
point too, because a lot of people still are dealing with a sale and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So even though we could afford to spend more than, the expected sale price of the house, we had to get it for under a certain price, otherwise it wasn't going to happen. So that was the source of a lot of anxiety. And like I suffer with anxiety pretty severely anyway. So like I know what my limits are and I'm just like, no, that's going to be too hard for me. So we basically just got you guys to do everything.
So you obviously chose. So we went through our normal processes. We put quite a bit of effort into prior to the auction day, so that you guys are comfortable with what's going to happen.
As I say, we found it really helpful when you sat there and we actually went through like, okay, what is your absolute limit? What are you comfortable with? What are you like, oh, it's kind of going to hurt, but we can do it. But and like,
Where's the buyer's remorse?
Yeah. At what point do we walk? Like, at what point, if we walk away, can you deal with it? And I remember I picked a really random number. It was like 6.5. I don't know. It was some very strange number because I was like, everyone always finishes on a round number. Let's go a little bit further.
So you were clear on your parameters. You felt comfortable that you had really worked out what this property was worth and
What it was worth to us.
Yeah.
And like it was an interesting one because the property, even just finding the property itself was funny because it was one that was listed that we kind of ignored.
Yeah.
It didn't really look like what we wanted. And you guys went and looked at it anyway. And you said, hey guys, I think that this is actually really good.
Again,
Yeah.
happens a lot.
Yeah.
We're just going to look at this one anyway.
Well, it was interesting because it had high ceilings.
Yeah.
So when you looked at the photos online, it made the rooms look quite small because you imagined like a 9-foot ceiling. But then when you actually went and looked at it, it was like, oh, this isn't anything like what because it was an old house that needed a bit of work. So we're just sort of trying to establish what it was worth to us, and then making sure we had enough money to turn it into what we needed to, but also coming in under that budget as well, because if it went over, we weren't going to be able to go through with the auction.
So you chose not to be there at auction day.
Yeah.
Well, it was a bit of a funny one because my old work that I used to work at years ago had a very, very special celebration day. And it had actually been meant to be the year prior because of COVID. They had to reschedule it and it fell on the auction day. And I was like, we can either sit at home, stressing like crazy, waiting for this auction, go to the auction, be a total wreck. Or do you know what? We can just trust Linda and Michelle. We can go to this special day from my old work, catch up with all our friends, have lots of fun. I think at the time of the actual auction, I was jumping off like a rappelling wall. Like jumping off a 13-meter rappelling wall. And I was like having fun. He was sitting there stressing. But it was just nice knowing that like, it's not up to us. Whether it goes ahead or doesn't go ahead, it's out of our hands. We've done all we can do. It's up to them. And I think that was taking that pressure off of us. Whereas, I think the scary thing about auctions is people getting carried away. Like, what if you're like, I just, you get that mindset. And for us, we didn't have to worry about that. We knew you guys weren't going to do anything crazy. We could just sort of relax.
Yeah, we were able to have, rather than being involved in the chaos and, the FOMO and everything of, the moment, we'd sat down prior, we'd figured out exactly what our strategy was, what our limits were, what we were comfortable with, as we were discussing before. So you guys were able to go in and just execute that plan without any emotion, right? Which is really what made the difference, I think. Because, like, honestly, I would have jumped in there and I would have probably just gone straight to what my maximum was because I was scared of missing out. And then,
again, a lot of people do. It's FOMO, it's emotive. They've got, people around them, talking to them and obviously the selling agent's trying to, get
Yeah,
the
they're
best
trying to
result
pump it up,
possible
yeah.
for their vendor, which is what they're supposed to do. So there's all of that going on where, you didn't need to immerse yourself in that. We were really clear with the strategy that we worked on together as a team, and then we had our clear instruction, and then it was our job to execute and work on our game plan strategy.
And that's another interesting point with your auction, because we can't necessarily work out the game plan. We know the strategy and the pricing, but we don't necessarily work out the game plan until auction day, because we need to work out who's there, what's the dynamic, what kind of other bidders are there, and there were other
It was a really busy auction. There were lots of people there. There were multiple bidders. It was a bit of a frenzy.
Yeah.
It was quite crazy on the day. So it was probably a good thing that we were preoccupied.
We have terrible poker faces. We would have been like,
we executed the game plan and it worked quite well, and we bought it well. So and we had feedback from one of the underbidders a couple of weeks after the auction, and without going into too much detail, it actually confirmed that our game plan worked a treat. Because they stopped bidding.
Their
perception
of
was
us
that we
was
had
very different to the reality.
tons, which is
We're just going to
so it worked
keep
well.
going forever
It
until
was
we
just
got it.
it was just we kind of intimidated the other bidders, and they backed off. And it doesn't always pan out that way. But if you're strong in your bidding, sometimes you sit back, sometimes you don't. Depends on you. You have to be able to read the room.
Because of the general lack of understanding around what a buyer's agent is. Just the fact that you guys were there and you were buyer's
But
agent.
we're not
would have-
nervous.
would have been intimidating to...
Totally.
Like if we'd been bidding against you guys, we would have been terrified. Because
That's a really interesting point.
You know what I mean?
Will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just the fact, they're buyer's agents. That sounds professional.
they sound fancy.
Oh, we've got no chance against them.
Because the reality is, particularly now, that with more and more, our industry is completely on the rise. So the chances are most buyers out there now are competing with us.
Yeah.
So whether it be on a property, selling private treaty, expressions of interest, auction, the reality is we are a competitor to a buyer.
And the other thing too, I remember is like, from the agent's point of view, not in an auction scenario, but in like just a buying scenario, if you're trying to sell a house and you've got just random Joe Blow coming in making an offer, and you've got a buyer's agent who is going to be, has a committed client, you're going to want to deal with a buyer's agent because they're not going to stuff you around. They're going to go ahead. You've already got those relationships with the agents that sort of gives you that little extra edge, I think. And like most people aren't confident in negotiating. Like, you buy a house maybe once, twice in your life.
That's a scary thing
It's
to
scary.
do. As well,
Like, I remember when we tried to buy Kincumber House, and I think we made like 2 or 3 offers, and they just kept saying no, and we didn't know how to deal with that. So we just were going, we'll give you more. Whereas I suppose a buyer's agent probably could have been like, well, we're just going to hold off. We'll make them sweat a bit, or you would have had that strategy. And I think
and when we bought that house, I think we paid about 40K more than we should have, just because I freaked out.
he freaked out. He was like, what do you want? Just tell us what you want. We'll pay.
Yeah, well, we in fairness to me,
I was pregnant.
she was very, very, very pregnant, and we just
Very pregnant.
I just need the security.
Will was doing what he needed to do.
It's like, my life won't be worth living.
But no, you make a very good point. And part of obviously we've been selling agents for much of our career as well. So we're very across what happens on both sides, which is 100% an advantage for us.
Yeah.
That knowing the psychology of what happens in a negotiation is very important, but also understanding the value of the house. If you're not 100% comfortable in even understanding what it's worth, then how do you negotiate effectively?
Yeah.
And we know what property's worth because we see property every day.
Yeah.
If you're someone who jumps into the market and wants to buy a house, you can't possibly know that because you haven't walked through hundreds of houses.
Yeah.
So that kind of gives you the confidence to know
At
where
the
it
end of
should
the
sit.
day, like, I mean, even like how many people, like on average, how many houses do people buy and sell in a lifetime? Like maybe
Exactly.
5 or 6 at absolute
Max,
most.
probably.
Yeah.
Max.
Whereas you guys are doing that a week at least. So I mean, you're in your element
6,
in that environment.
when we're busy.
You're in your element in that. In that
But we are
situation.
buying every week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Every week, and we're looking at heaps of property. We buy every week, but we're looking at hundreds and hundreds of property.
Yeah.
That's how we value property.
and across the entire coast. So we've got this huge library
yes.
there's Well, for me, I'm 30 years this year in real estate. So I've got a 30-year library in my head.
Yeah.
And I've got comparables. And I know you have this unique skill when you're in real estate. Most of us do. If you've been a selling agent or a buyer's agent, you have this, you remember floor plans, you remember features about a
And
house, you
prices.
remember aspect, you remember prices.
Yeah.
So you can draw on that information all the time. It's out there at the moment that you can't be an expert on the Central Coast. You can only be an expert in a certain area. Well, that's for someone who's not as experienced as we are. We've been doing this for 50 years between us on the coast. So because we've got that ginormous library and all of the network that we have, we can draw on that information all the time.
Yeah.
And that gives us the experience to operate.
Well, even just little things like I remember through the purchase of buying this house, like the conveyancer that you guys recommended picked up
Yeah.
something that saved us 10 grand.
Yep.
That's right.
Local knowledge.
And it was purely just down to local knowledge, you know?
That's why we recommend Sandra Miller. Can
Yeah.
we just say she's
Yes.
absolutely
She did an amazing
fabulous.
job, yeah.
And you know, some clients say, "Oh, should we go with your recommendation?" We recommend her because she's good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She's very, very
She
good,
picks
and her
up these
local
things.
knowledge is
Yep.
fabulous. And she picked up that she did. She saved.
All it was just it was a pressurized sewer system that had been installed that was still being paid off.
No
And
one
she's
else
like, I
picked it
remember
up.
that street had these things put in. I should check.
There you
Like,
go.
You wouldn't know that.
That's right.
You wouldn't know that unless you knew it. And I think we were the only ones that picked it up out of all the other bidders.
True.
As well, so
There
It's
you go.
interesting. We learnt about Sandra's methodology. She actually looks at the property online before she starts working on the contract.
yeah.
So she picks up things like, oh, that bathroom looks new. I need to do my due diligence around that. I mean, we give her the brief on the property for sure. All of the team we work with get a brief of the property.
Yeah.
But she obviously has in her own processes her own due diligence. So she looks at all the property photos and looks for key things that she knows that needs to take her on further investigation.
And also when it comes to, again, back to using a buyer's agent to look at houses, you guys also know what you're looking for. So like we might walk in and, you know, a new coat of paint and some new door handles. We'll be like, oh, it's renovated, it's beautiful. Whereas you guys know where to look and what to look for. So for example, the house that we bought, it was an older style house. It was in its full 80s glory. It was truly Nana curtains everywhere. But you guys were able to look past that and go, well, actually, the bones are good. Structurally, it's good. You know, this is something that you can change. And it actually won't cost that much to change as opposed to, you know, there's some serious issues here. This isn't what we want to go with. And that, again, that's the kind of stuff that because we're not builders, we're not renovators, we're not, you know, we don't know what to look for. Whereas you can sort of see the kind of warning signs of, oh, it may look good. It's a bit of a Monet, like it looks good from a distance, but if you get closer, it's not a good property.
Yeah, it comes down to, you know, being in your element and dealing with that kind of stuff all the time.
And seeing so many houses.
Yeah.
It's almost like the red flags kind of jump out at us. We walk in and most people look at the styling and, oh, this looks nice. And we kind of just, we're desensitized to it. We do. We don't sort of get blown away by, oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's straight away we're looking for
And
things.
ceiling.
100%.
Yeah.
So a lot of the property we just discount. If it's not an A-grade property, and I say A-grade, I don't mean brand new. I just mean A-grade, good location, solid, might be a renovator, might have been renovated. Either way, we're looking
to a
for quality.
buyer pool. So something that ticks all the boxes that buyers, and we hear all the requirements. And so we know walking into a property, if it meets the majority of the requirements that most buyers want, then it's consideration.
Yeah.
But if there's a compromise somewhere, and a significant one, it could be the floor plan, no indoor-outdoor flow, which is a huge thing for families,
Yeah.
then, you know, we're instantly moving on to something else that offers those features.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the misconceptions? I mean, let's talk about some of the Facebook community groups that are out there. And I know, Jill, that you're in, you know, you guys are a part of one of those. What are the misconceptions out there, do you think, about buyer's agents? They are a reasonably new service.
Yep.
You guys fully understand it now. What would you say are the misconceptions?
I think definitely, first of all, price. People think you have to be completely rich and buying a McMansion if you're going to have a buyer's agent. Understanding what services people offer. So, for example, people think if you have a buyer's agent, they do everything. So they find the house, they do just literally everything, and they just go, here's your house. And I think people don't realize that there's different options available. So for example, you guys could, someone someone could find the house they want and then just engage you guys to actually purchase it. Or someone could find the house they want and get you guys just to go to the auction for it. Or it can be like us, where we kind of were like, we don't have the time to look at houses. We don't have the mental capacity to want to go driving from one end of the coast to the other. Can you go and actually inspect the houses on our behalf? And, you know, you can save time that way. And I think people think a buyer's agent is just like an expensive thing. But if you actually look at the time and the cost of, you know, if I was to spend every single Saturday for what, a year and a half that we were looking,
more than that,
looking at houses every weekend, oh my gosh, we'd probably be divorced by now.
The stress that it creates
And the
as well.
stress and having to deal with the agents calling you 24/7 about, did you like that house? Do you like, you know, we didn't have to deal with any of that. You guys were like our little protected bubble that would go out, find some options, view them for us, and then make a private inspection at a time that suited us. And so I think people sometimes don't understand the full options of what's available.
I think people often don't put a value on their own time as well. That's a big challenge just in general society. And like that's a skill that I've learned through running my own business, is that I have to put a value on my time, because every minute is worth X amount of dollars to me. So just respecting that about myself and saying, you know, all right, my time is worth this. It makes sense for me to pay for this to not be my problem, basically.
100%.
And also knowing
Really
with
good
my
point.
anxiety as well what my limitations are, and, you know, making sure that I'm below that. So like it helped me to cope with the whole situation. But yeah, people don't place a value on their time. So they look at a buyer's agent, they go, oh, well, that's nothing that I can't do myself. Maybe that's true, but
Is it worth the stress?
is it worth the stress? Is it worth, and I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it as well, but, you know, 9 times out of 10, I'm sure they end up paying less than, you know.
Mostly.
I mean-
Nine times out of 10 is probably right.
Yeah.
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 That's how it pans out. Over and above the fee, they're saving money.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing with us. Like, you guys were able to get it for less at auction because of your skill and knowing how to handle an auction. You were able to get it for less than we probably would have.
Well, look, I mean, the reality of our particular story is probably that, you know, we would have ended up buying something that costs more than $500,000 more than what we actually bought, that wouldn't have been as suitable and would have put us under a lot more financial strain than we are now, just because we would have panic bought the first thing that seems suitable. Or
Do you think people buy, and your opinion on this, do you think people just get so sick of it they buy out of frustration?
yes.
Or time, they think,
I know someone that
I know somebody that did that.
we know
Yeah.
someone into that, and they do. They just they panic. They go, "I've sold my house, or I've got to move by a certain deadline, or there's nothing out there. There's never going to be anything. It's just not worth it." Whereas you guys were always like, "There's going to be something out there. This wasn't the one. It's okay." Like you know, you have enough experience to know that something will come up. And
Well,
just
that's
kinda
really,
help us
Yeah.
keep going when I'll be like, "We're never going to find it."
Well, I think, you know, it's, again, just operating in your element. And, you know, this is something that I have with my job as well. Like, I'm so desensitized to, like, I do product reviews. So I'm so desensitized to the emotion attached to the excitement of unboxing a new product that all I see is what?
You don't get carried away.
All I see is the objective stuff. I don't have any, you know, subjectiveness going on at all. So, and it's the same for you guys. Like, you're able to just look at it in that sense, completely logically, and remove all of that emotion from it.
Very true. That's a really good point, because we did start on your journey and then we had a pause because we were readjusting. I guess we went on the initial journey, which really helped you work out what it was you really wanted, and also as far as your lifestyle. So it wasn't just the property itself, it was also your lifestyle and your family dynamic.
And the business and moving that out of the house,
So-
all those kinds of things.
Yeah, so we had a pause and we were more than happy to give you that time to, you know, do what you needed to do to get everything in place, and then we started again. So 100%, it's not a race. It's not about, you know, setting a record on how fast we purchase. It's really about what's right for you and waiting for that right opportunity to come along, and particularly with your scenario, because it was very niche and you needed that time to really work through all of that.
Yeah, but in saying that, I still feel like, you know, because you guys have got your finger on the pulse with regards to what the market's doing as well, I feel like if it had been more time sensitive, I think if you guys were able to see, you guys need to do this now, otherwise you're going to be priced out.
Yeah.
You would have told us.
Yeah.
Right? Because we might not have been able to figure that out for ourselves.
No.
Yeah, sometimes it's the conversations that we have with our clients, and we had one this week where, you know, we actually they really like this property. We recommended that they don't buy it. It just wasn't for them. And I think that's the important thing. While selling agents are there to assist, they're ultimately working for the seller. They're respectful and great at their job and they're helping buyers, but they're not going to give you that. They're not on your team, so to speak. They're selling the house and getting the best price they can, but we're really there. And if we have to say, guys, I don't think this is for you, then we do.
Well, I mean, a good selling agent is going to make you feel like they're on your team.
That's right.
When they're not, because that's their job.
Right. That's their job. So
do that.
We're here to really be on your team and say, I don't think this is for you, and have those hard conversations.
Especially when you're listening and they're trying to talk themselves into a property because it's time sensitive. There's nothing really else, because stock has been a major factor for quite some time, going on 2 years now. We've had exceptionally low stock levels. So people are frustrated out there, and with many of our clients, we're having the conversation, look, it's not a race. This is going to take longer than all of us anticipated, but none of us can control the stock. So you don't want to make a buying decision out of the wrong reason. You want to make sure that you're completely confident, it's the right timing, and it's the house that's going to, serve you on the long term.
And we definitely went through that because we actually made an offer and accepted a different house. And then ultimately made the choice that this wasn't the right, that we decided against it, which was, we felt awful, but at the same time, you guys were able to support us through that decision, help us to, I guess, navigate that relationship with the agent and with the owner when we pulled out of the sale, which was it was really a tough decision for us. And we felt terrible, but at the same time, we also knew that we couldn't go ahead with it. And you guys were able to kind of talk that through with us, help us to kind of get some clarity on, was this just a knee-jerk reaction and we were freaking out and, just calm down, it's going to be okay, or wasn't the right house for us. And that was something that I think was invaluable for both of us, knowing that you guys could be not an impartial mediator, but someone who had the experience and oversight in real estate to help us sort of work through whether or not it was the right choice. And ultimately, we didn't go ahead with that particular house. And we are so grateful because
it wasn't the one.
It wasn't the right
Oh, it was a beautiful house. It just wasn't.
It just wasn't the one. Yeah.
And now we are we've probably spent the next 6 months going, did we make the wrong choice? Did we do that? Maybe we should have done it. And obviously now we know we have definitely made the right choice in not taking that house and going with the one we have. But it's good to have you guys be able to kind of talk through rationally and non-emotionally and go through all the pros and cons and have that experience to sort of know the answers.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both probably felt in that particular situation very out of control and out of our element, and genuinely we didn't know what the right thing to do was. And there was quite a bit of not conflict, but probably misalignment with the two of us as well. There were elements of it that you loved and there were elements of it that I loved, and I probably wasn't really considering the impact that it was going to have on the family relocating and moving schools and those.
It's all really great, and thank you so much for sharing the personal side of the journey, because this is what families go through. And this is what we help with. So it's not just about buying property. It's about getting to know you guys and your family. And we've come over and seen your new kitchen and had a cuppa.
And the amazing workspace you've created. It blows our mind. It's incredible. Never seen anything like it.
With the house is just exactly what you envisioned. And we love that.
And you can ride those motorbikes.
Yes.
Yeah, you can, and it's a great story and a really lovely ending.
Yeah.
I guess before we finish up, what would you say, I guess, to those who are maybe sitting on the fence, they're struggling, they're considering a buyer's agent? Is it worth it? Should they do it? Should they? What's your advice?
I would say just call you guys and get a feel for the vibe and have a chat and figure out if it's the right fit. It may be that they do need a buyer's agent and you guys are the right ones. It may be that they don't need a buyer's agent. It may be they need a buyer's agent, but you guys aren't going to gel with them. I think that it's worth exploring the option. It's worth finding out, just to have a chat with someone about helping them to kind of clarify their ideas. I think it's always worth having that conversation. It's always worth having a chat. Yeah, you don't know. You don't know. You may be like, I don't need a buyer's agent because I know exactly what I want. but maybe you don't know what you want. Maybe having that conversation and you might be like, yeah, we want to live in this area because of this, this, and this. And you guys have the local knowledge, go, yeah, but did you think about this? And all of a sudden they realize that maybe it's not quite, they're not so sure in their ideas. So I would say just call, have a chat, see if it's worthwhile.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple of things that come to mind. So firstly, I think the two, we've kind of touched on it before, but the two barriers are like the cost. Like it sounds expensive. And also I think particularly guys don't like to give up control of things.
That's a good point.
So
Okay.
I think a lot of guys in this situation would probably kind of look at it and go, oh, I don't need that. I've got this under control. It's fine. For me, like I was saying before, like I know my limits, so I knew what I could and couldn't do. I think really put yourself in the situation, really consider, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, how in an ideal situation do you think somebody could help you do a better job at this? Because it is the biggest decision financially that you're ever going to make, most likely. And it has knock-on impact on every area of your life, where you're going to work, where your kids are going to go to school, all that stuff. So it's not something that you want to mess up.
Yeah.
So would you not want to have the most experienced people possible helping you with that, And what value would you actually put on that? And what we were talking about before as well with the value on the time, what is your time actually worth? Is it worth it for you to have somebody, not, take that responsibility away from you? And then just consider the fact that, in our particular situation, I genuinely think that you guys probably saved us more than $500,000 ultimately, because we would have bought the wrong place and we would have paid too much for it,
And the stress and the time and the, all of those things.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely.
And even if by some miracle we had actually ultimately landed on the same house, which wouldn't have happened, we wouldn't have been able to afford it because, we would have jumped in and gone too high, and it just wouldn't have worked out. So I think really, not everybody's journey is going to be exactly the same as ours, obviously, but I think you got to be honest with yourself, know what your strengths and weaknesses are. And, I think about, if you were needing surgery or something like that, you're not going to do it yourself. You're going to want to have the person that's most knowledgeable to it for you, right? It's kind of the same.
Fantastic. What a great point to
We'll take that.
We're not quite surgeons, but anyway.
No, it made really good points, and we really appreciate your transparency. You've honestly raised so many of the concerns and talked about your journey that, there's snippets of your journey that so many other people experience, whether they're single, a couple or a family. It's the number one topic in many of the community groups that, we're involved in. How do we do it? Where should we go? Where do we start?
Which schools are good?
Absolutely. It's literally on everybody's lips. So I think a lot of what you've talked about from your own experience hopefully will help many listeners out there at least get started, or know where to turn if they do need support. So Will and Jill, thank you so much again. We really appreciate your time and sharing so much of your journey.
Thank you guys for making it happen for us.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Unreal Estate. If there is someone that you think would benefit from the information that we've shared today, please feel free to share this episode or leave us a comment. We'd really love to hear your feedback. We release a new episode every 2 weeks, so to stay up to date, hit follow or subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.